Thank you very much for the floor. I would like to discuss an interesting issue connected with the implementation of the Resolution 1 2030-25 in connection with the things which happened in the Balkans in the 90s. Interestingly enough, when we were starting as pacifists in the war which was coming, the resolution did not exist. And when the first peace agreements were made in this part of the world, it does not exist. It did not exist either. But it existed already when we had the problems in Macedonia, and I will show you what was the difference between these two situations. In this resolution, there is the first article which says something like this. Security Council of the United Nations urges member states to ensure increased representation of women at all decision-making levels in national, regional, and international institutions and mechanisms for the prevention, management, and resolution of conflict. It's a very nice statement, but when you go and ask yourself, what does it mean in practice, then you are immediately in big trouble. In the second part of the 80s, only in 3 republics of the former Yugoslavia, in Slovenia, in Croatia, and in Serbia, women in civil society and partly in political practice, like in Slovenia, for example, we were organized enough to form a new independent women's movement and to launch public debate also on specific issues on gender equality as a part of the democratization phase of the so-called transition. These movements were also an important part of the democratic requests for political control over the army, for the demilitarization of the society, and we were the last fighters for the peaceful resolution of the menacing violent conflict, when the men who were pacifists before already left the movement because they thought that there is no way that we can do it in a peaceful way anymore. But women peace activists and other human rights activists did not understand that we should have been asking for the half of political power within newly formed political parties. We didn't do that. So all our over former Yugoslavia, the first 3 elections were a total disaster for women. Before the war started, we were out of politics, completely out of political power. From an average of 26% of women in the former parliaments, socialist parliaments, we were down to 2 to 8% of women in the parliaments. And what was really horrible, in every single republic where this fall was below 5% of women MPs, we got full-fledged armed conflicts. In Slovenia, this was not the case. We didn't have the war. But in every other part of the former Yugoslavia, this percentage was below 5%, we got the war. Women peace activists in the civil society, as well as in some political parties, we have never given up our strive to prevent the wars, and when they erupted, to restore the peace. We were also capable to keep our connections across all ethnic and religious lines, and also across the lines of fire, even if not in every single case every group was capable to keep the distance strong enough to the ultra-nationalistic national environment. We had falls, but in general the movement was connected and stayed together. But in the war times, we were also capable to be present in the international networking for women human rights. And it was a big effort from our peace groups, included in the Beijing conference and in the formulation of rape as a crime against humanity. It was done with our support. But in the moment when the peace was made, our groups were still not politically strong enough to be invited as stakeholders into the discussion about how to make peace. The peace was made with warlords. The peace was made with war criminals. And this is why, up till now, we still have the problems how to restore peace. And the women, of course, were not invited to be a part of these negotiations. Interestingly enough, when the resolution was already in place, and when we had the eruption of conflict in Macedonia, women in Macedonia were already strong enough and organized enough to ask for the place at the negotiating tables for the peace in Macedonia. And Stability Pact leadership was ready to open this door for the women, but national political leaders said no. And so they were excluded from this discussion. The question, of course, is that when and how women finally understood that if we really want to change the situation and not to let us again to be transformed into the victims and objects of the conservative male aggressive politics, the only way is to get our half of the power. It was very late when we understood that we need our half of the power. And I think that the appeal to the summit of the Stability Pact in Sarajevo, which was signed by 150 NGOs and groups all over former Yugoslavia and other countries of the southern Eastern Europe, it was a sign of this different consciousness and different strategy. Now I would like to enumerate some obstacles for the inclusion of women in the consolidation of peace and democracy in the Balkans. First, international support to emerging new democracies and market economies totally ignored, not only in the Balkans, everywhere, totally ignored the issue of gender equality. It was not seen or promoted as one of the pillars of democratic transformation of any of one-party regime. I think that this was a very big mistake in this process of transition. The second, there was no serious governmental, organized, real support to emerging women's regional and national peace agencies trying to prevent the wars in the Balkans before the conflicts erupted. The only support we got was the support from the civil society groups, which were poor as we were the same, and could not really help us to become massive women's movements. It was not done in this way. In the times of the conflict, international support again was focused on humanitarian issues, on the aid to the women as victims of war atrocities, but there were no attempts to create massive political anti-war advocacy of women and its formal representation. If you do not do that, how can you then have women as negotiators at the table of peace? They are not organized in order to be representative, to be accepted as partners in the discussion. International actors, again, were making peace, and even now they are doing unprincipled deals with the former warlords and with today nationalistic leaders. And where you have this attitude, there is no justice for war crimes, and where there is no justice for war crimes, there can be no real peace. In the post-war stabilization and recovery, there was no clear perception of the international actors that this post-war transition in the Balkans should not repeat the mistakes done in other transition countries. It was the opposite of it. The pressure to follow neoliberal patterns of transition, for example, quick, non-transparent privatization in favor of international companies and domestic tycoons, or a quick privatization of former universal healthcare or education. It was done in our countries from day to night without any real